Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar on Uncover the Power of Centralized Logs in Google Cloud. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend this session. And in terms of logistics, feel free to engage with us on the chat option, or we'll also have a live Q&A towards the end. And if you're watching a recorded version of this webinar, then leave questions in the Google Cloud community channel, and we'll be there to respond back to you. All right, let's get started. First off, quick introductions. My name is Afrina, and I'm a product manager working on Google Cloud, and my area of expertise is cloud logging. And today I'm joined with my colleague, Keith. Keith, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Keith. I'm also a product manager from Google Cloud, and I manage the Log Router product. Very excited to be here today and talk with you about log centralization.
So, thank you, Keith. So, in terms of agenda, what are we going to talk in the next 45-ish or 50 minutes or so? We want to start about why are we here, but not literally why are we here, in terms of why, what's the purpose of this entire session? And then we want to talk to you about absolute must-know strategies. We'll also compile, like when we talk to you about a strategy, we'll also have a demo. And then towards the end, we'll talk to you about cost optimization for logs. And then we'll summarize and do Q&A at the end. So by the end of the session, our goal is to help you do 4 important things that's outlined. But to give you a little bit of background, Keith and I have been working with several customers who are currently either migrating from one observability solution to other or are moving from on-prem to cloud, right? Migration has been a constant effort that we keep hearing. And having spent thousands of hours in the past year, we've seen organizations make some very expensive mistakes because of one minor teeny tiny configuration. So the goal for this session is to really help simplify the concepts around storing your logs properly, meaning how do you architect a logging solution in Google Cloud? So by the end of the session, we want to help you do 4 things. Understand the best practices for storing logs. Number 2, identify ways to reduce operational overhead for your DevOps teams. Like if not configured correctly, your DevOps team is most likely managing thousands of config files and trying to figure out what's the best way to reduce human error. Number 3, understand cost optimization strategy. Now, if you are a centralized platform team and there are several thousand sub-teams that are reporting up to you or dependent on you, then it's on you to figure out how do you optimize costs, how do you throw it back to them. And finally, all along the way, we want to talk to you about what is the industry-wide best practice for architecting the logging solution. Right. So let's get started. Without a centralized and a well-structured logging solution, SREs are flying blind in cloud. Well, if this statement resonates with you, give us a +1 on the chat section so we know it resonates with you. Well, it's true, right? You can't troubleshoot what you can't see, and you can't proactively maintain reliability without data-driven insights. Well, all of this is not a new problem. We've known this, right? Now, imagine your data looking like this. Like each box could be a different observability data, which is your metrics, logs, and traces. And each box could also be a different tool. Like there are customers that store metrics with one vendor, logs with another vendor, trace with another vendor. And imagine when you are in a war room trying to troubleshoot an active outage and your data is messy. You have to go to like Elastic, Splunk, AppDynamics, Datadog, like Google Cloud Logging, Google Cloud Monitoring, like 10 different tools to just go pull your data. Everything was messy. Now, as you can see, there are some data actually find home, reach the end destination, versus some get lost in transit. Now, be it on-prem or cloud, all we're trying to do is constantly trying to build a single pane of glass experience, right? Now, imagine a single pane of glass experience where you into your cloud visibility into what's happening end to end, the 360-degree view. And no, the concept of organization is same, right? Whether it's your clothing closet or your food pantry, it's same. It's just that there are ways that you do things differently in cloud. So single pane of glass is all we need to make a DevOps life easy, right? Would you agree with this? So let's talk about how we might achieve this in Google Cloud. So first step to achieving a single pane of glass experience is essentially collecting your data from different places. So in Google Cloud, observability data can be collected from on-prem, hybrid cloud, and your Google Cloud. So the beauty of collecting all of that in Google Cloud is the data that you collect from on-prem, the data that you collect from other hybrid cloud services, they all would behave as if they were born in cloud. So there's really no difference in experience because your log is coming from a different place. The experience with your logs, metrics, and traces would essentially be the same as though it was born in cloud, right? As though it was cloud native. Now, Google Cloud aims to be vendor neutral, and we do not want you to have a lock in experience. Hence, there are several ways for you to bring in data to Google Cloud. Now, when I say data, the entire session is going to be focused on observability data and most importantly, logs, right? Three important observability data, logs, metrics, and traces, and this session is going to be focused on logs. Now, what are some of the ways you can bring in data into Google Cloud? Now, we have three options, and feel free to choose whatever works best for your workload. Number one is Ops Agent. It comes pre-installed if you are a GKE and Cloud Run customer, hence the reason why you have Tail 1 observability. If you have JCE VM, then you would have to install it. We also launched that we now support the ability to collect out-of-box GPUs, which is graphical processing unit. If you're running your AI ML workloads on GCP, then you'd be able to use your Ops agent to send all the GPUs to us. Number two is Open Telemetry Collector. Google contributes heavily to the Open Telemetry world, and we support our customers using an OTel collector. You'll be able to using an OTel collector, you can collect signals from multi-cloud and on-prem workloads. Third option is BindPlane. BindPlane is built on top of OpenTelemetry. They are a third-party vendor, the most trusted vendor, and they can help you remotely manage your telemetry collection. Here's a quick architecture for BindPlane, right? But think of it, you have your host metrics, databases, system logs, apps, and databases, and these can come from different sources. So BindPlane sits in the middle, and they are able to ingest all your data from different sources, hybrid, on-prem, and then they're able to aggregate and filter and do any transformation that you need before you send us. And in terms of destination, you're again able to send it to multiple destinations. If you want your logs to go to cloud logging, you could do it. If you want to send it to Chronicle or another third-party provider, you're able to do all of that, logs, metrics, and traces, right? Right. Now that we spoke about how to collect logs, which is actually the first step, next is the big elephant in the room, which is how to design a logging solution. So when you're trying to design a logging solution, it's important to understand what's the high level architecture. So this is a very simple high level architecture diagram, and there are three components that's absolute must knows. Number one is you send all your data into a logging API. From the API, it goes into a router. Think of router as the pub sub for logs, right? Our router has amazing capabilities. Like you're able to set in an inclusion filter, an exclusion filter. You're able to route logs to other destinations. Then, from the router, if you say, okay, I want to store my logs in Google Cloud because I want to be able to analyze and troubleshoot them, at that point, logs go into a log bucket. Now, a log bucket is very different than a GCS bucket. Log bucket is auto-optimized for logs. Like your logs would get auto-indexed. It's immediately available for you to visualize, troubleshoot, go see your dashboard, create alerts on that. Right? Now, this high-level architecture is for one project. Now, if you are a centralized SRE team, imagine this for thousands of projects, right? You're a large enterprise or a skilled company that has thousands of projects, and you're trying to figure out how do you kind of maintain all of this logging projects and collect logs from all of these projects in one destination. So now this could be you, right? Every SRE, architect, or a DevOps engineer is expected to build a solution which is highly scalable, cost efficient, highly secure, easily integrates with your other services that you use, and is easy to manage, right? Now that's quite a lot, right? You're literally just juggling balls. So over the next few sections, we're going to ask some most difficult question to help Sally here to come up with designing an effective logging solution which they're able to centrally manage for the entire organization. So, the way we're going to run the next session is I will be asking all of these challenging questions, and Keith is going to help answer that and show us a quick demo on how to implement it. So, you get to hear the challenge that SREs are undergoing today, and you also get to see how to go implement the solution right away. All right, so let's get started. Challenge number one. Now, if you have thousands of projects, a 5 people SRE team, how can they route logs from multiple projects at the same time without causing human error? Of course, Terraform is an option, but we've seen teams make mistakes as well. So, so again, to reiterate the question, now you have thousands of sub projects and you want to be able to route logs to all of that into one central destination without depending on n number of config files. So Keith, can you help us understand how might we do this in a very simpler way and avoiding our overhead?
Sure, Frina. This is actually a common question that I get a lot, especially when users are thinking about centralizing their logs in a big and complex setup. So the great news is that our log router product was built with this kind of complex scenario in mind. So we aim to give you a whole range of flexible options so that user can tailor everything to their own specific need. So I know that most of our users are more accustomed to managing log routing at the individual project level. And in fact, every Google Cloud project comes with a couple of built-in log syncs that help users route and store those logs right there within the project. However, when things get more complex, like when you are centralizing your logs, it's really common to create additional log syncs at the folder or even at the organization level to streamline the log management. And I know that there has been some misconception that you cannot set up log sync at the folder or at the organization level. And that's definitely not the case. We even have a name for those log syncs. We call them aggregated syncs. Just like the name suggests, aggregated syncs pull together logs from all your trial resources into one place so that it's easy for you to decide where to route those logs to, as well as what logs you want to keep. So besides the aggregation aspect, they work pretty much just like the project level log syncs. You have the same filtering option. Say you can add inclusion filter, exclusion filters to pinpoint exactly what you need. And plus, you can support the same destination, like you can route logs to log storage. So you can use all the free tools that we offer for troubleshooting as well as advanced analytics. And also you can send them to other Google services like Cloud Storage or BigQuery, and even to third-party application via PubSub. All right, so that's enough talking. How about we jump into Google Cloud Console, and I'll walk you through creating a aggregated sync at the folder level. Okay, so right now I'm in my folder, and I have headed over to the log router page under cloud logging. And if you're not sure how to get here, it's okay. Just use the search bar on top, type log router, and click that result. You'll get to the same destination. Now let's click on the create sync button and start by giving it a name. If you have set up project level syncs before, this should look very familiar. Click next, and under sync destination, we are going to pick Google Cloud Project. And click browse, and now select a project that I have made earlier. And this is my central project, the one that I'm sending all my logs to. All right, now see this choose logs to include in sync section. This is where things get a little bit different from the project level syncs. We want to select the second option. This will allow you to aggregate all the logs from its child resources. And from here, you can add filters to select the logs that you want to aggregate. If you leave it blank, it will include all the logs. And click next. Just like project level syncs, you can also add exclusion filters. And this is how you create an aggregated sync in a folder. All right, we can go to the next slide. So that's how you create a aggregated sync. One thing I do want to call out is that when you use aggregated syncs, there is something to watch out for. You might accidentally write your logs twice. This can add unexpected costs to your logging bill. So let's break it down why it happens. The thing with aggregated sync is that now you get two places that you can manage where the logs go, right? You can manage that as source level, And then you can also manage it at a higher level resource, say your folder or organization. And this flexibility sometimes is very useful. Maybe there is a project owner who wants to keep certain logs, let's say application logs for troubleshooting, right there within their own project. And that's totally fine. But if there is no coordination between project and the aggregated things above it, you could end up paying double for storing the same logs. So here in this slide, we listed a few options that you can consider to avoid double writing. So you can try to better coordinate between project owners and those who are managing the higher level settings. You could also create a org policy in Google Cloud to disable the default log syncs in your source project. And you may also consider using automation to manage all your log syncs across your organization. But the thing is, each of these options has its own trade-off and might need extra management effort from your company. So that's why we come up with a product level solution. So we are adding a new intercepting option to aggregate sync. So this puts more control in the hand of the folder and org level admins. So let me show you how it works. So if you don't mind, we can go back to the last slide for a little longer.
This one?
Yes. All right. So I want to show you how this works with the diagram on the right. So this is an organization that has turned on data access logs. And we have a aggregated sync created at the folder level to aggregate the data access logs from all the child resources into that one place. And those logs are being routed to a central project and stored in that log storage. And if, say, by accident, a log sync is created in project one to also select the data access logs and route them to project one's log router, we end up having the same logs being stored twice, which will incur additional cost. So I can go to the next slide. So now in this new diagram, you can see that with this intercepting option, it will stop the selected logs from being propagated back to the source project. So even if a sync was created in project one to select the data access logs, nothing will be routed to its log storage because those logs were not sent back to the source project in the first place. So this intercepting option is ideal for high volume logs like data access logs or VPC flow log because storing those logs twice are very costly and there's usually not much value for storing those logs separately anyway. So this feature is being rolled out by the end of March. So when you are setting up or changing a aggregated sync in a few weeks, you will see this third intercepting option shown here on the screenshot. That is your new option to avoid double writing. So Frina, I know that's a long answer, but hopefully it sheds some light on how Log Router can help you manage routing at scale.
That is super, super, super helpful. Thank you so much, Kate. So if I summarize this correctly, aggregated sync is amazing. You're able to still route without less management overhead, but intercepting is what you need to have the control, right? If you lose visibility, but intercepting will tell you that if there are child projects that are double logging, then you're able to almost cut your cost down by half. So that's amazing.
That's exactly the right interpretation.
All right. Now, I have more difficult questions coming your way. So let me ask you then my next question. So now that, we've centralized all the logs in one central location, how can I manage access and retention with my centralized logging project, right? I don't want to give access to every single person in the organization, but I still want to be able to give, granular access. So how can we set different retention and access controls in my central logging project key?
That's a good question. So with cloud logging, you definitely have very flexible option to manage both retention as well as access control in a pretty granular fashion. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about how cloud logging stores your logs. So every Google Cloud project automatically starts with 2 log buckets. I think we can go to the next slide. So you can see that you've got a required bucket. This hosts a special set of the other logs that are free to our customers. And then you have this default log bucket for everything else. Now, it's super common for users to make more log buckets to organize their logs better. So we call these user-defined log buckets. Usually, the reasons for splitting things up are mostly related to retention and access control requirements. So for retention, you can control that at the bucket level. For the default log bucket, as well as the user-defined buckets, you can change the retention period individually. I know that there are some industry, they have regulatory requirements that require them to store all the logs for 10 years. So in that case, what they can do is route all their logs into one order log bucket, set the retention of that bucket to 10 years, and then everything else can stay at the 30-day default retention. And for access control, you can also start that access control setting at the bucket level as well. You can set different IAM permissions for each log bucket. For example, you may want to make your audit log bucket more restrictive for security and privacy reasons. And our access control can get more granular than that. Imagine you want to have different access control, different access permission within just one single log bucket. You can create multiple log views within that one bucket, and then you can manage access right down to the view level. And if you need to get even more granular than that, we also provide a view level access control, allowing you to restrict access to certain log view based on IAM permissions. While we are talking about access, I also want to mention something that's important. So even if you don't store logs in your source project where they came from, those logs can still be seen. Those projects can still see the logs by default, regardless where those logs are stored. And if you want, you can further customize the scope in Log Explorer by refining project scope. I know I talk about a lot of information, but don't worry, I'll give you all the links to all the docs to these options in the video description below. So Afrina, hopefully that answers your question.
That's very helpful. I can see how, if you're a financial services organization and an audit team requires access to your logs, then you're able to provide one of these log views for them to go, take a look at your logs. That is super helpful. All right. Now I have another question when it comes to centralizing. One is, you spoke about retention and log views, but if I want to route the centrally stored logs to other destinations, how can I do that?
That's a fair question. And the short answer is that the best way to get this done is to use the log router in your centralized project. So log router is a really powerful and flexible tool. It can easily turn your centralized project into a management hub. You can use it to decide which logs to keep and where to route them to, and even to destination that's outside of Google Cloud. But before we dive into how that works, I think it's very important that we first touch on a recently launched feature, and we call it Project as a Sync Destination. So see, before this option, when you had to send logs between projects, the only way was directly into the log bucket in that other project. Think of it as bucket as sync destination, right? Like illustrated in this diagram. And the downside of this is that the logs totally bypass the log router in the destination project. That meant no control in the destination over how those logs flow. And the log router features like log-based alerts would not work for those logs. But now with project as a sync destination, you can click one more time in that slide. Yeah, and now you see that the logs are getting processed fully by the receiving project's log router. In this case, that's Project B's log router. So this is actually a game changer because now Project B is in full control of how to manage those incoming logs. So if you are, paying attention, you probably see where this is going, right? This new feature is all about making sure that the receiving project, or in our case, the central project, has the power of managing those incoming logs. All right, so now let's see how this plays out when you are centralizing the logs. Let's go to the next slide. So when you send logs to your central project using project as a sync destination, whether you are using aggregated syncs or not, you're essentially decoupling two important tasks. One is centralizing the logs, and second is managing the log selection and routing. Handling the centralization becomes way easier now because all you're doing is pointing all your log syncs at the central project. And once all the logs from across your environment are floating into one project, that central project, you get to manage where they go in one place. And you can also use all the out-of-the-box feature from Log Router in the centralized project as well. Now, obviously, I'm simplifying a lot here. Big complex setup may have multiple central projects for maybe access control reasons or different layers of folder and projects structure. And that's totally fine. Remember, our log router is built for those trickier scenario with a lot of flexible options. So now this is the core of how you can turn the central project into a log management app. So how do we do a quick demo and show you how easy we can use the centralized project to route logs to a pub subtopic? Okay, we're in the central observability project. I've got a few workloads running in the background, sending all my logs here from a number of source projects. So let's take a look at Log Explorer and see what logs do I have in this project. So I see that I have some Cloud Run logs. Let's click on that. And I also see that the logs are coming in from 3 different source projects. So let's click on Project C. So now we are just seeing the Cloud Run logs routed from project C specifically. Say I want to create a new log sync just for these logs and send them to a pub subtopic. I'll first make a copy of this query. And then I will go to log router. I'll click create sync, give it a name, and click next. And then I'll pick the cloud pub subtopic that I've made earlier. Now under the inclusion filter, I'll paste in what I just copied. Basically, the search to grab those Cloud Run logs from project C. I could hit preview logs to double check that I'm getting the right ones if I want to, and that would bring me back to Log Explorer looking at the same logs. And in this case, I do not need to add any exclusion filter. All right, so this is how quickly you can log through the logs across environments, right, that's sitting in your centralized project. Pick a subset of the logs and set up a new log sync and route those logs to a new destination. And there are a lot of cool things that you can do, like setting up log-based alerts, log-based metrics, and I will leave some more links in the video description below so that you can further explore. Back to you, Afrina.
That was a super helpful demo case. Like I love how you're able to use project as a sync destination to be able to leverage the power of log router. So kudos on building that out.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is, I guess, this is also one of the most common questions that centralized DevOps team face. Right? Now, oftentimes they're centrally collecting all of, all the data. So with centralized project as a management hub, it will process a ton of logs. So how do I track its volume? How can I break down the logs that is received by destinations? Also, can I attribute the log volume back to the source project? If I'm able to do this, I will be able to throw cost back. So I want to understand which teams or applications are sending me the most amount of logs so I can optimize costs. So how can we solve this?
Yeah, this is actually an area that we are actively working on. And one of our goals is to make the log volume information more easily accessible. We can go to the next slide. We want to give you a snapshot of things like recent trends, routing destinations, all in one place. And this is particularly important when you're using the central project for log management. So let me give you a demo of a new log router UI that we are working on, and we will be launching it in just a few weeks. So I want to kind of give you a sneak peek of what we are adding to this log router page. All right, I'm in a demo environment right now, and I want to show you a few sneak peeks of what we are adding to a log router page. So check out the left side. There is a new metric showing you the overall log volume your router has been handling. This includes the logs ingested into this log router and routed to different destinations. Now shift your eyes to the right. That's your log volume trend over the past 2 weeks, broken down by destination. In my case, I'm routing logs to cloud storage and log buckets. This chart makes it super easy to spot any change in your log volume. If there is any recent increase in log volume, you will be able to see it quickly. Say hypothetically, you notice a spike and want to further investigate. You can then scroll down to the log sync table. And we are adding this new column to show the volume trend for each individual log sync. If there was any sudden volume increase, you will be able to quickly trace it back to the sync and look at the sync filters for clues. Moving to the right again, there's another metric, billable volume from other projects. This focuses on logs hitting your storage and causing those cloud logging costs. And this metric tracks logs sent from other projects, which is super useful in those log centralization setups. And the middle chart can be easily added to a dashboard. You can click on Explore Data, and then you'll see the underlying data for that chart. You'll see that data are grouped by different destinations. We have log buckets, BigQuery, pops up, other Google Cloud projects, and cloud storage. And let's click on Save Dashboard. I'll make a new dashboard, and we'll come back to this in just a minute. Again, that was just the demo environment. So if you're watching this live, and you log into the log router page right now, you will not see the same thing that I was showing. If you check again in a few weeks, say late March, it's very likely that you will have all those features already available in your log router page. Let's go back to the previous slide real quick. So there's another goal that we are trying to focus on is to make it simple to attribute your centralized log volume back to the original project and also the specific resources that were generating those logs. We are already offering a number of free system metrics that help you analyze your billable log volume in more detail. So now I want to switch to another demo and show you how to use some of the free system metrics to gain valuable insight into your billable volume within the centralized project. Let's go to the demo slide again.
All right, for this demo, we would like to start with Metrics Explorer, which is under Cloud Monitoring. And if you're not sure how to get there, just go to the search bar, enter Metrics Explorer. You can click this result and get to the same page. And let's click on Select a Metrics. Let's enter Log Bucket. Click on Global, Log-Based Metrics. We want to use bytes streamed into log buckets. Notice that there are two with very similar name. We want to pick the one that start with log bucket. Or you can see the full name here, log buckets bytes ingested. Select that and click apply. Now we are looking at the billable log volume for this centralized project. And we want to add aggregation by log source so that we can break it down by source project. And let's change it to stack area chart so that it's easier to see. So now we can easily see that the log volume are mostly broken down into 3 projects. And there's a 4th one, that's this current project, which is not generating a lot of logs. So from here, we can click Save Chart so that we can save to that dashboard that we just created. And next, I want to uncheck log source and add a different dimension. Let's add resource type. So for this one, I think it's easier to change to the table. So now I'm looking at in the past 2 weeks, what are the different resources that are sending me logs. I can also save this to the dashboard that I created earlier. Save chart. And let's look at different metrics. Delete this one, select a metric, enter log bucket. Global log-based metrics. Now let's select bytes stream into log buckets monthly, which gives you the month-to-date billable log volume. Select that, click apply. And then let's add log source again. Now we are looking at the month-to-date billable log volume breakdown by source project. Say we want to know the month-to-date volume as of March 11th. So this is the breakdown. Now let's click on Save Chart so that we can also save this to the same dashboard. Now let's click on Dashboards on the left and then click on this dashboard that we just created. So let's take a look at what we have here. The first chart displays overall log volume handled by the log router in my centralized project, including a breakdown by destination. And this is the chart that we just saved from the new log router UI. And the second chart focuses on billable volume within my centralized project. And this chart identifies the specific source projects contributing to that billable volume. And for the third chart, I think it's easier to read if we change it to a table format. So let's change that. Click on table, click apply. So now we also have a table showing billable volume but broken down by monitored resource type. This allows you to pinpoint to the specific resources generating those log volumes. Finally, the last chart provides a month-to-date view of the log bucket billable volume, again organized by source project.
So Frida, this is what we currently have, and also a little bit of what's up and coming in just a few weeks. And as I mentioned earlier, things like log management, log volume tracking, as well as cost attributions are all areas that we are focusing on. Right now, users can already get to the volume data and trace it back to the source project when needed, like we just see. But it does take a little bit digging, right, to find the right metrics. And we expect to bring some of that key information more front and center, similar to what you saw in the log router UI demo, so that you can make your management process much more streamlined. So hopefully that's a good answer for you. And back to you.
Totally yes, and I'm excited and looking forward to seeing the new Logs Router UI. So it shows the holistic picture for centralized projects. So super excited for that one.
Great.
All right. Now that we've spoken about, how to configure, how to design logs, and what are the right ways to, centralize your logs, and we've also understood kind of the power of centralizing. If it was not evident in what we've spoken so far, when you centrally manage and store logs, it makes troubleshooting, visualization, and getting your 360-degree angle really easy. So let's talk about one feature that I want to highlight today. Like, let's say now you have all your logs centralized in one location, and you are an SRE and platform engineering team, and you want to be able to see and query all of those logs, metrics or traces. We recently went live, or it's about a year, we went live with log analytics. And right now we are trying to bring in the next version, which is observability analytics, which is an evolution of log analytics. Now, what this means is simple. It's logs, metrics, and traces in one UI. It's essentially what we have been all looking for. It's having one UI for all three observability signals in Google Cloud Operations Suite. And what is the backend? So the backend right now is going to be BigQuery, or the backend is going to be BigQuery, and the front end is going to be CloudOps. So what that means is if your data would be stored in BigQuery in the backend, and you would be able to use SQL, which is one of the most common languages in the world, to go query your data. You're able to use search functions. Like, let's say all you want to do is search an IP address. That's easy to do in SQL, right? So you should be able to go into log analytics, use a search function, and you should be able to go search that. The responses should be super fast. BigQuery has stellar, amazing processing power, and to be able to use the power of BigQuery for observability data makes it extra powerful. Now, our why is because this brings in the single pane of observability. It builds a differentiated experiences, and it would enable you to do AI ML workload on your observability data. So logs on the BigQuery backend is called log analytics. It's already GA. You should be able to type in log analytics, as you can see in this image. Go to your Google Cloud Console, type log analytics, and you should be able to run queries. We also have a GitHub. Just Google GitHub Observability Analytics, and you should be able to see all the sample queries that if you want to go play around and run. So log analytics is available. Metrics in BigQuery and trace in BigQuery is in private preview right now. You can reach out to us if you want to be included as part of private preview. But essentially, well, you're in log analytics. You're able to go from querying ad hoc, like you don't have to figure out how to go store your database in BigQuery. We do all of that. We take care of storing your database in relation of taking care of your database. We take care of your data. We take care of your data residency and all of it, right? You are not building a pipeline, managing a pipeline. You're not doing any of it. Data is stored in JSON format, and we take care of all the pipeline. All you have to do is go run the query. So you can go from typing an ad hoc query to trying to visualize it in a chart, and then you're able to add to a dashboard, and you are able to create a dashboard with your logs, metrics, all in one UI. Now, when you're oftentimes moving from another vendor, you're able to, customers leverage our observability analytics and dashboarding platform to be able to recreate the dashboard they've had. We also are launching the ability to create alerts using SQL, which makes it furthermore easy, right? Oftentimes, the very big challenge in observability space is literally learning the hundreds of query language that each specific vendor has. So this is also an attempt to make it furthermore neutral that you don't have to learn another query language. All right. So now that we spoke about what are the various ways of storing logs, how can you go use observability analytics if you want to find out, okay, which team is responsible for this logs? What is happening to these logs? Are there security issues? Is somebody trying to run, is somebody trying to is somebody trying to do an unauthorized login? Right, you're able to answer questions from biz ops, security ops, look into what is my average latency for the past hour. Look into all of that. You're able to use observability analytics. Now, let's touch on the most important topic, which is Once you've built all this, you know how to analyze it, you know how to troubleshoot it, and then comes your cost optimization, right? Now, when you're moving from on-prem to cloud, it's really not an apples to apples comparison, but then cloud costs can look seemingly high, right? Like imagine this: when you're an on-prem, your cost is your cost of data structure, cost of data center, cost of sending somebody to go maintain it, a lot of people like admins and security personnel to go maintain the whole infra, and then you have application layer sitting. So it's really hard to translate the cost to individual teams, right? Versus in cloud, all you're going to see is really two, and especially if I have to talk about logging, all you're seeing is two important costs, which is your ingestion cost, and another one is your retention cost. Now, ingestion cost gets charged when a log gets stored in a log bucket. Remember the architecture that we were just looking at it, right? So we don't charge you for sending your logs into our API. You could send all your logs into our API. And then there is router. We don't charge you for using a router. So you are able to use the power of logs router that Keith has been explaining about, all of that without incurring any cost. And then you decide, okay, at the logs router level, you'd be like, okay, now I've filtered, used all my strategies. Now you can only pay for what's getting stored in your log bucket, which is the last one. So let's talk about some of the strategies that you might use to reduce cost. Number one, sampling. The logs router, you could set up a sample. You could say, you could use a sampling technique for a very high voluminous log. Let's say you have data access or network logs. They tend to be very chatty, right? So you could start and say, okay, you could start small. You do not know how much your teams would be missing, but you could say, I only want to store 90%. Then you come down to 85, 80, 75, based on how much you need. So by setting up sampling, you're able to reduce the volume of logs that gets stored. Uh, this load balancer logs is also a good example if you want to use a sampling technique. Number two is exclusion filter. Now, this is super powerful if you know how to use it, right? Like if you choose at the logs router, you could say, I want to exclude all my, let's say, HTTP OK responses. Now, is it going to be a value add for your developer to see all of these HTTP OK responses in their logs, or would they be okay with you excluding? Because if you exclude it, you're going to save cost, right? So if there are redundant logs, if there are logs that just says, okay, 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 and they come in, a trillion times, you're able to reduce it down. You can also alternatively sample such messages. You could either exclude or you could sample. Now, number three, what you could do is you could figure out a strategy for your log retention. Now, there are different types of log retention strategies. Some organizations would be like, hey, I'm a financial services organization and I need to store my data for 7 years for compliance purposes. However, during the 7 years, I do not need the ability to go troubleshoot and access it. At that point, you would use a compressed storage. You can go store it in Google Cloud Storage where data is not available for you to go visualize and troubleshoot. But then another option could be organizations that say, I want this data active for 3 years because I want to be able to compare my data from previous Thanksgiving or Black Friday sale to this Black Friday sale, right? They want to have year on year data for active comparison, active troubleshooting, active running like an AI ML on top of your observability data. For that use case, we suggest that you use the cloud logging, where you're able to store your logs for up to 10 years on hot active storage, and your speed and performance is not affected. Now, number four is tool consolidation. Figure out ways if your teams can consolidate all their needs into one. Like with the power of log analytics, like I mentioned, you're able to bring in different use cases. Like you're able to ask your SecOps teams, your R&D, your BizOps, your BizDevOps, all of them can leverage the same underlying observability data for their business goals. You do not need to have 3 or 5 different applications doing the same thing for you, right? And that's a significant cost saving. And lastly, multiple log copies. When Keith explained about aggregated syncs and intercepting sync, you understand that there might be opportunity, or there might be instances where or circumstances where there are like child teams that are storing the logs here in the sub project but also sending it to a centralized project, right? So when you double double write or when you double store a log, right? When you store a log in two places, essentially means you're paying twice because the way we charge is when a log enters a log bucket, right? Again, this does not apply for a required bucket. Any data that has a default um, retention of 400 days means that Google has to store that for our compliance purposes and you don't pay for it. For any data that has a default retention of 30 days, I mean observability data in specific, it will be charged based on the public pricing. Now, storing multiple copies, you have to make a conscious decision as to does my organization need it or can they do without it, right? These are some of the cost saving strategies that I have used with several customers over the past year, and it has helped customers reduce their cloud cost spend significantly. Now, let's summarize everything that we discussed in the past 46-ish minutes or so. So we spoke about log routing at scale, which is we explained the concept of aggregated sync and intercept, basically trying to send all your logs from your child projects to a centralized location. Do you want to have control over it or do you not want to have control over it, right? So we spoke about log routing at scale. Then we spoke about once it is centralized, how might you set different retention period and how might you divide granular access based on log views and field level access. Number three, we spoke about using project as a sync destination. Now, this is also powerful because if log router has all of its capabilities, and if you're an end project, and if you have the ability to apply an exclusion filter from your end, and the source project does not have to worry, it gives you a full control of what you want to store. You are able to control your cost management overhead, all of that, right? Having logs router is essentially the key to making your project as a sync destination, making that as a centralized primary management hub. And finally, we saw the new log router UI that's about to come, which will help you identify which teams are sending you all of these logs and how can you throw costs back at them. And finally, how do you use system metrics to break down your billable log volume. Now, that's everything that we had for today's session. And I want to Oh, we do have Q&As, but before we go there, we are going to be there at Google Next 2024 in Vegas. So if you plan on attending, these are the sessions that are going to be observability focused. Feel free to stop by, come tell us a hi. Right. In terms of resources, if you have any questions, if you're watching this webinar in a recorded fashion, then feel free to engage with us in the Google Cloud community and also give us feedback. We would love to improve. Here are some of the upcoming sessions or webinars that's happening. Oh, there's two on March 14th. Take a look and let us know if you're interested and join the webinar. All right, now Keith, are we ready for some Q&A?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, over to you.
So let's bring the question up one by one. So we got this question, the viewer is asking, I'd like to know if there is any possibility to link Google Logs with LLM to try to make smart monitoring or have LLM to make small remediation action in case of error. I think that's a very interesting question. And I guess, how can we get through a session without talking about LLM? So if the question is more around our internal integration with other Google Cloud services, I can tell you that the cloud logging ecosystem is already integrated with Duet AI. If you go to Log Explorer today, so that's the tool we use for troubleshooting with logs, you can already ask Duet AI some natural question like, help me summarize this log entry, or explain this log entry to me. So, when it comes to logs, sometimes they're not superhuman readable. So having a feature like that really comes in pretty handy. And if this question is more focused on external integration, maybe with users' own LLM model, so the solution we talk about, I think, make perfect sense, right? You can group all your logs into one place, and that within that centralized project, you're going to pick and choose the logs that are valuable to your LLM model, and then you can set up a log sync, select those logs, and set up a destination as the PubSub, so that your downstream data pipeline for the LLM model can subscribe to the PubSub. That way, you are getting the near real-time logging data from our platform, and also you're receiving it through PubSub in a very low latency manner. So hopefully that answers the user's question. And then we can look at the next one. So in a multi-tenant environment, what is a recommended pattern to move Kubernetes namespace logs to tenant projects, log routers, and sinks? There is a default limit of 200 per project. For this one, I think I might need more information to answer it accurately. But in general, in the project where you have the Kubernetes resources are located, that's where you want to start. That's where you can set up the log sinks with filters, so that you can select the logs that you want to include for that particular sync, and from there you can route them to your tenant project's log buckets. So this is a little different than the pattern that we talk about. This is more like a distributed pattern, but in a multi-tenant environment, I think that's not uncommon. So usually, customer wants to do that for billing or maybe data ownership purposes. So I think if there's any follow-up question regarding this, feel free to ask in the community forum, and we can follow up there. And let's see, I think we have one more. So is there a way we can assign read-only views based on the filters on a centralized project? The way logs are stored in one spot, but the tenant only can view logs related to them. So I think this question is probably was asked before at the section that we talked about access control. I think in general, we already talked about you have pretty flexible options to manage access control with the log storage. You can do that at a bucket level, log view level, or even at the log field level. So in general, you can structure your logs, all the different logs coming from different sources, and structure them at a bucket level based on your access control requirement. And from there, you can set up permission, read, write permission to manage that at either a bucket or log view level. So hopefully, what we talked about earlier is enough for you to answer this question. And also, one more thing I want to talk about is the point that even the logs may not be storing in the source project, but because those logs were generated by the source project. So even though they are not sitting in the source project owner will be able to see those logs, even though it's sitting in the different buckets as well. So hopefully that answers your question. So I think that is all the question we have. So if we now pass back to you.
Okay. So as always, thank you so much for staying with us towards the end of the webinar. And that concludes everything that we had to discuss with you today. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the Google Cloud community channel, and we'll be happy to engage. If you're coming to Cloud Next, come tell us hi, and we'd love to meet you there. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a good one.